Welcome back to the Batman Code. This is the final video in a three-part introduction that will be a complete 6-video series covering Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight Trilogy in literary depth, looking for a pattern similar to what we found in a brief overview of the Narnia Code. And the subject of today's lecture, The Dark Knight Rises. Christopher Nolan has called this movie the most underrated of all the films he's directed. And maybe when we take a closer look, we can start to understand why that is. On my analysis, we are dealing here with the fourth and final cardinal virtue, justice. We've already examined the previous 3 virtues along with the parts of the soul and the parts of a society that these are supposed to be perfections of along the way. I raised the term dikaiosune and the question, if the Joker is a devil and a perfect aphrone, can we seal the deal on the Batman Code by demonstrating that Bane is the maximally unjust man, a dikaiosune man? Bear in mind, this Greek word is also interpreted as righteousness. Righteousness and justice are synonyms for Plato, exactly as they are in the Greek New Testament. Is Batman, then, being depicted in this film as the righteous man? Big problem. How is that uniquely different from the topic that we were supposed to have been looking at all along? Let me illustrate. The fourth cardinal virtue is supposed to be a harmony between the previous 3 virtues and all the parts of society or parts of the soul that they perfect. Let me use a musical illustration. Let's line up all 3 social classes of Plato's Republic, and let's suppose that our dogs and guardians have their respective virtues of courage and wisdom. Now, let's bring them together. One last detail. We can't have these notes stumbling all over each other, and Plato insists that each part do its job and not meddle or interfere with the jobs of the others. Every class of the state, like every part of the soul, should be doing its own work and not trying to perform the functions for which they are unfit. So let's tidy up our notes a little bit, make sure each one has the virtue of restraint, that is to say, sophrosine. They're well-tempered or reasonably restrained, and as Plato depicted, we wind up with a harmony. That, my friends, is a problem. When all the parts of society and the soul are in place and are informed by their requisite virtues, then you already have the fourth virtue present. To illustrate, suppose the 3 notes in my musical illustration were being played by a small trio of musicians. Then the conductor suddenly says, let's try that again, but let's add some harmony this time. You guys see a problem with that? Here it is. The fourth cardinal virtue is not like an extra note that you add to the mix. And didn't we already cover the first 3 virtues when we were talking about Batman Begins and The Dark Knight? What more is there to add? The Batman already brought harmony and justice to Gotham, even if it is a delicate and precarious arrangement at the end. So what is there to do but just sit back and listen to the music? I am not going to watch that for 2 hours, and I'm definitely not going to pay $15 to see it. So what direction is there for this 3rd installment of the trilogy to go? The Batman already brought justice and harmony to Gotham, and the effort of the Joker to bring disharmony and chaos was stopped already. I'm going to take you through my exploration of this puzzle. How is this movie uniquely about justice, given that Plato seemingly makes that fourth virtue redundant? And how did I eventually stumble upon the Nolan brothers' solution to this problem and their code? Well, first I examined whether or not there was in fact too much meddling going on in Gotham. For example, the police meddle in Batman's attempt to stop Bane's stock market heist, and, of course, by the same token, the Batman was meddling in their police affairs, and I do recall that according to Plato, Bruce Wayne wasn't supposed to be meddling in the marketplace and stock market because auxiliaries and guardians in a Platonic society are supposed to keep their hands off the marketplace and tend to the business of civil defense and law enforcement. Still, I couldn't get my thesis off the ground here. There's just not enough. Want to see me pull a rabbit out of my hat? I'm going to take what seems to be the weakest point of the argument that I have for the Batman Code, and by the end of this video, I'm going to turn it into the strongest one by proving that this movie is genuinely and uniquely devoted to the fourth cardinal virtue, dikaiosune, and the villain, Bane, in particular, pertains directly to this topic. I began my exploration at the safest point possible. What's in a name? With all the name plays going on in this trilogy, that's bound to offer a clue. The big twist in this movie, of course, is that the principal villain suddenly turned out to be Miranda Tate. In the end, it was all a revenge plot that she launched in retaliation for the death of her father.
Hello. My name is
Talia.
You killed my father.
Prepare to watch helplessly as I torture a city of 12 million people that you love and protect as they clamor desperately for life and oath, only to burn to death and screaming in the heat of a nuclear explosion while you lie in agony with a broken back and your spirit rots in a dungeon cell until you finally realize your life was all for nothing and die in despair without any remaining hope in this world and no one to mourn you, ending your own miserable life by suicide. Damn, girl, I did not know you and your dad were that close. Didn't he kick your ass out of the League of Shadows? You know, this movie could have developed that a bit more, but does anybody really think a woman's going to get that vengeful? I totally believe it. Movie gets a pass. On we go. The name Miranda, coined by Shakespeare, and it comes from the Latin meaning admirable or lovely.
Quite lovely.
Quite lovely.
In other words, yeah, she's quite lovely. That's just what the name means. And Marion Cotillard, it really is quite lovely. She just gave birth weeks before filming began, and Nolan insisted she play the part. If you can share screen time after giving birth with Anne Hathaway, who was working out for 6 days a week, then you are definitely quite lovely. If I tried to do something like that, you could put me in a beauty contest with an English bulldog, I'd still come in second. Now, the name Tate means cheerful. You may have noticed in this movie that she's quite... What the heck? No, she's not. Okay, what's going on here? Let's take a look at that name again. Okay, Miranda is a name coined by Shakespeare for his play The Tempest. Miranda is always associated with a storm in classic and contemporary art, and importantly, with the shipwreck that the storm brings. A storm that brings the ship of state down. Once more, to the art museum. So obviously Nolan is using this link in reference to the shipwreck of the Platonic ship of state, and that's the reason that it's so ominous Captain Jones shows up midway through this film. That's a reference to Captain Davy Jones and Davy Jones's locker, the graveyard of sunken ships. In fact, Blake even tells Captain Jones, Bane's revolution is a sham. He's watching Gotham rearrange its deck chairs while the whole ship's going down. And you can also see why the fundraiser in the film had to be a masquerade ball. There's 2 masks or masquerades in the play The Tempest, and while I was researching this, I noticed that the Globe Theatre in London was having a revival of The Tempest at just about the time The Dark Knight Rises was released, and not very far from the Tate Museum of Contemporary Art. Now, this museum houses the work of Francis Bacon, who Christopher Nolan cites as his favorite painter. Bacon painted the portrait that you see Jack Nicholson's Joker sparing in the 1989 Tim Burton Batman film.
I kind of like this one, leave it.
Now, that portrait, Man with Meat, has had a significant influence on many portrayals of the Jokers in cinema, and you might want to take a look in the background when the Joker is torturing Brian Douglas. Those meat slabs? That's a tip of the hat to Francis Bacon. While researching, I found out that this museum also houses the work of William Hogarth. Hogarth was the first painter in history to put oil to canvas and depict a scene from one of Shakespeare's plays. And guess what it was? A scene from The Tempest titled Miranda. It's at the Tate Museum, folks. Miranda at the Tate. Miranda Tate. Hey, why don't we go snooping around the Hogarth room of the Tate Museum and see if we can find any other stuff that... Holy hell! Holy hell! Well, slap my ass and call me Robin. That is a masterpiece. And guess what it's called? Satan, Sin, and Death in John Milton's Paradise Lost. Dad nabbit Nolan, you little rascal. You are doing Sin, Death, and the Devil. I knew it. Look at these paintings side by side. You can tell the one on the right has had a lot more work put into it. It was so famous back in its day that political cartoons were actually based off of it. Before this, the only depiction of these characters in this scene from Paradise Lost was the one you see here in the 1688 publication of John Milton's book. But Hogarth has taken it to a totally new level. This, my friends, is the unholy trinity. Satan is actually the father of sin, and through her, he is both the father and grandfather of their offspring, Death. This painting has had such a strong visual influence on the Dark Knight Trilogy that I'm going to have to go into the details. As I said in the last video, Satan actually gives birth to sin out of his own skull or his own mind, no assistance needed. He does that by and through himself. And remember, in Christian theology, God the Father also has a son or offspring that he generates by himself, no female companion necessary. But just as the Son of God is the perfect image and likeness of the Father, Satan sees in his own daughter his own reflection, his own perfect likeness. That's trouble, because Satan is an arrogant prick who perversely only loves himself, and that makes it pretty easy for his daughter Sin to seduce her own dad, since he sees in her his own perfect likeness. Yuck. But the offspring of their union is death, and death is even worse than his daddy. He straight up rapes his own mother, and from there on she's a hideous half-human and half-grotesque serpent, perpetually giving birth to vicious hounds that gnaw and chew their way out of her pregnant belly. Frickin' hell.
Very poor choice of words.
I have seen some awkward family photos in my time. This one is pretty hard to beat. So the unholy union of Satan and his only begotten generates the very opposite of the spirit of life. That is, this case, a spirit of death. This is what the philosopher Edmund Burke, who incidentally was Hogarth's patron, described as a prime example of the horrific sublime in art, the unholy trinity, a satanic parody of the Holy Trinity, bound together in lust and hate, whereas the unity of the Holy Trinity is held together in genuine love. Okay, I for one am very happy that a lot of elements of this backstory did not make it into the Dark Knight Trilogy, but I can show you what did. It's hard to overestimate the visual impact this painting has had. Let's start on the left. Satan's face, still thunderbolt scarred. And the weapons, see the arrowheads, people? Weapons of spiritual warfare or purely mental warfare, and notice neither combatant has a bow in their hands. They wield their weapons in this and all other similar portrayals in art as if they are daggers. Moving below, the setting. They're all consigned to a place that is 7 times referred to in Paradise Lost as the pit. That's just 2 times less than in this movie.
A pit. Sometimes the pit sends something back.
Condemned to this pit. She took his place in the pit.
I climbed out of the pit.
And there's something missing, something right here. But it's not missing in the works of later artists who depicted this scene. Let's see if you can spot it. Once more.
Let's broaden our minds. Aaron?
On this key is inscribed the word risen. Sin is risen from the pit. She holds the key to getting herself, as well as Satan and death, out of their confinement, their imprisonment.
Do you have keys?
Do you have an unnecessary literary reference? Why, yes, Mr. The Batman Code, I think I do. Dang it, Bruce, you are literally sleeping with sin. Could have at least given us those 1960s pop-ups there. But the real action, it's on the right side of the painting. It's not hard to see a family resemblance here, is it? And I don't care what about the crazy backstory they had to tell to get that mask on Tom Hardy's face, because he totally rocked as Bane. Behind this figure, the gates and chains of hell. You get a lot of references to these in the fight scenes and parallels that are offered between the jaws of Bane and the gates behind him in the pit. 2 speeches out of 4 that Bane will give clearly depict him as the character of Death from John Milton's Paradise Lost. But the biggest thing you didn't notice, the backdrop. Death is not outmatched, quite the opposite. That blackness and darkness behind him, he is literally one with the darkness, and Lucifer does not stand a fighting chance in the contest. Perhaps if we had been standing in front of this painting at the Tate with Christopher Nolan and we shared his particular interest in the significance of black within a painting, we'd get a better impression of what's expressed here. Take a look at these other depictions. Even the light of the light-bearer Lucifer is in danger of being swallowed up by an undefeatable darkness snuffing it out. In other words, Death is a suffocating darkness. Death knows that no mortal thing can defeat him, and Lucifer tries helplessly to hide beneath his shield. Oh, Satan, you think darkness is your ally. You merely adopted the God, I'm merely adopting the movie script. Okay, no mortal thing can defeat death. Which raises a paradox. What if, hypothetically, somebody could descend into death and have the power to take up their life back again, overcoming death by death itself? Now that person could repel even the darkness of death, breaking the jaws of gates of hell and setting the prisoners free. There is such a man, my friends. His name is Batman. Ha! Thought I was going to say Jesus, didn't you? If anybody wasn't able to spot Jesus in the third movie, well, I feel sorry for you because you must be blind or something, but here I present to you again the gospel according to Batman.
Let's see that in an instant replay.
More copycats last night, Alfred.
You, sir, have no place talking about copycats. Seriously. So when Nolan thinks of the villains in his trilogy, rest assured, people, he's actually thinking of them like this. So enough about Miranda Tate and the Tate Museum. Let's get into the name Bane. To my surprise, even though the word Bane can mean anguish or death, the name actually means benevolent protector.
The child had a friend, a protector.
If not for my protector, Bane. The prisoners and doctor had done their work to my friend, my protector.
Not hard to see how that made it into the film, but how in the heck does any of this get one step closer to the Republic of Plato, or the virtues, or the Batman Code? Then I discovered this. Yes, that is their way. This and no other is the root from which a tyrant springs. When he first appears above ground, he is a protector. When he first appears above ground, he is a protector. And here he comes, folks, up like death out of hell.
And we come here not as conquerors, but as liberators to return control of this city to the people.
So when the tyrant first appears, he is the benevolent protector. But as Benjamin Jowett points out in his commentary, when the burgeoning tyrant gets a bodyguard and puts down all his rivals, he stands proudly erect in the chariot of state, the full-blown tyrant. And here he is, folks, getting his army and bodyguard proudly erect in his chariot, or if you prefer, his camouflage tumbler tank of state. Remember, chariots were the tanks of ancient warfare, and this is bad news. As Jowett also points out, this stage represents the collapse into the fourth stage of decay for a society, which is tyranny, the disease and death of all government. The disease or death of all government. It's important to note that these two phrases, the chariot of state and the disease and death of all government, are not found in the Republic itself. They are only found in Benjamin Jowett's commentary, which confirms what I said earlier about the Dark Knight Trilogy and the Man of Steel. In Little Clark Kent's hand, that is, in fact, the classic translation and text of Benjamin Jowett. And that is what your scriptwriters are working from in this trilogy. So the word Bane can mean anguish or death, but the name Bane means benevolent protector. But when the tyrant first appears, he is the benevolent protector of the people. But when he stands erect in his chariot of state, he reveals himself to be the tyrant absolute, which is the death of state, which takes us back to the original connotation of the word Bane. You guys are still taking notes on all this, aren't you? Let me get to the point. When this man is revealed, according to Socrates, he is the maximally dikaiosune man, the maximally unjust or unrighteous man. Dikaiosune, that's your fourth cardinal virtue, and that's a lock on my thesis. Yes, Virginia, there is a Batman code. And remember that rabbit I promised you?
How about a magic trick? Ta-da!
You're welcome.
But wait! There's more!
Socrates says that the only reason he brings up the subject of the rise of tyranny and the rise of the tyrant is to contrast a maximally unjust man with his opposite, the righteous man. So if Bane is the maximally a dikaiosune man, the Nolans think Batman is...
They think he's a righteous dude.
The Righteous Man. The original title of the Republic, the theme of this movie, and the overarching theme of the entire trilogy. It's officially rabbit season, everybody, because the entirety of this movie was based from a single chapter of a single book by Plato. It's the Republic, Book 8. So, let's get an overview. And let's discuss our original problem. How is this movie uniquely addressing the problem or topic of justice? Well, according to Socrates, any state, regardless of how perfect it is, will eventually fall into decay and disrepair. That happens in predictable stages. First, it devolves into a timocracy, from the Greek word timeo, meaning to honor. This honor-based society will eventually turn away from restrained and wisely honored pursuits to the pursuit instead of wealth and power, and thus it will eventually decay into an oligarchy. The oligarchy, in turn, will give rise to class warfares because some people are just going to be better at getting the money and power than others, and when the least wealthy overthrow their oligarchs, you have the rise of democracy, and that's the last stage before a society falls into the hands of a tyrant, into tyranny. So what you have are stages of decay, starting with maximal harmony as well as rational restraint, which decays into unwise and excessive honor-seeking. This sort of imprudence and excess gets transferred over to wealth and power-seeking, and from there, the gradual and inevitable accumulation of more and more wealth and power into the hands of fewer and fewer leads to an excessive thirst for freedom and liberty on the part of those who can't fare well by the standards of the decadence in the oligarchy, and who slowly lose any power or property within that oligarchy. Thus, democracy erupts from a love of freedom, but sadly also from a lack of restraint regarding what sorts of limits their freedoms ought to have. They break the oligarchy, but prove inevitably that they weren't any more virtuous than the oligarchs, only less talented in money-making and power-mongering. Now, obviously, you've got a parallel here with Plato's theory of the structure of the soul of an individual and the structure of the state. These stages of decay in a state correspond to a situation where people, considered as individual souls, stop living for the life of the mind and understanding and start living to satisfy their spirited element, but then start to prioritize only the satisfaction of baser appetites and the gut and belly. Remember, the life lived for understanding is the highest quest and most noble. Excessive honor-seeking in a society, by contrast, can lead to a preponderance of lion-hearted men in society. Remember that? Society becomes one of fierce competition and vainglorying. When vainglory starts to be measured by property and power, the life in which the gut is the person's ultimate god characterizes that society, and it's a life controlled by the multi-headed hydra, the heads which could be wealth, power, freedom, sex, and just about any other base-level appetite. In short, this breakdown or injustice within a society corresponds to a breakdown in the virtues, whether considered as virtues of a society as a whole or in individuals within that society. And that's an important point. The parallel between the righteous individual and the righteous state is central to the Republic of Plato. And as the book states, the states are as the men are. They grow out of human characters. So corresponding to each stage of societal breakdown is a typical or characteristic personality that exemplifies that particular stage of decay. A typical timocratic man, lion-hearted, competitive, vainglorious. As we move into the belly region, a wealth and power-seeking oligarch. And lower still, the democratic man, an absolute libertine who has only their own freedom as a value rather than the good of society as a whole. In The Dark Knight Rises, that's an easy call. Your excessive honor-seeking timocratic man, Peter Foley.
I'm gonna do what Jim Gordon never could.
What's that?
I'm gonna take down the Batman.
What type of government is an oligarchy? It's a government resting on the valuation of property in which the rich have power and the poor man is deprived of it. The oligarchic man who is concerned only with wealth and power, that's John Daggett, of course.
But you understand only money and the power you think it buys. So why waste my time, indeed?
And the democratic man? In this case, it's a Democratic woman, Selena Kyle, who only wants liberty and the freedom to get out of Gotham with a clean slate.
I started out doing what I had to. Once you've done what you had to, they'll never let you do what you want to.
Start fresh.
There's no fresh start in today's world.
Each of these characters in The Dark Knight Rises, as well as the tyrant Bane and the events that occur involving them, and even their psychologies as described in detail, described in the Republic Book 8. More on that in the next video. Now you can see why justice and moderation, the first cardinal virtue and the last one, are so closely associated in Plato's thought. The harmony of the whole breaks down corresponding to a breakdown in rational restraint in the classes of the state. Let's take a closer look at the breakdown of rational restraint as it occurs in the belly region of the soul, or the mercantile class within the state. Remember when I pointed out how the villains of the trilogy are being lined up? Bane is indeed striking from below. He's the enemy of the fourth cardinal virtue of justice precisely by undermining everything from below, taking advantage of a division in the belly of society, the bowels of Gotham, and the division within the mercantile class under a system called oligarchy. And the lack of rational restraint woven throughout Gotham by this point and bringing decay to the whole city will eventually lead to its collapse. It's time now for a scene analysis again. I have chosen Bane's stadium speech, the tyrant when he first appears above ground as protector. Remember, the Batman trilogy, according to my thesis, is an amalgamation of the ideas of Plato's Republic and Paradise Lost, with a lot of other little gems thrown in the mix. Bane gets 2 speeches depicting him as Death from Paradise Lost, and 2 more speeches depicting him as the tyrant appearing, and then secondly, the tyrant full-blown in his chariot of state. Among the little gems that we're examining along the way is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. It's been noticed, for example, that when Bane sits knitting in the kangaroo courts of Gotham, that's a reference to the main antagonist of the Dickens novel. I think these guys have been reading each other. But there's something else they've been reading as well. In the final stages before society collapses into tyranny, Socrates says that state becomes 2 nations struggling together in one, the rich and the poor. In other words, there are paupers and there are rogues. That's right. There is a tale of 2 cities going on here, but it was in the Republic Book 8 before it was in Charles Dickens. And the 2 cities in questions have names. They are the paupers and the rogues. Socrates does not like either one of these classes. He compares paupers and rogues to drones in a beehive. Just so you know, worker bees are not drones. Rather, they're the ones who actually produce honey and keep the hive functioning. The lazy drones in human society can be rich or poor, and in every case, they're pretty damn useless. These people within the mercantile class make the mercantile class useless and unproductive, just like your stomach would be useless if it wasn't providing nourishment to the body. In actual beehives, drone bees usually don't have stings. Socrates says the big difference in his illustration is that in human society, some of the useless drones are going to have stings and some won't. Let's be clear here. The stingers Socrates is referring to is money. The rogues of society are the useless drones who have their stingers, i.e. money, and scandalous money-making techniques such as high interest rates and marketing tricks to take advantage of the poor little drones, and senseless little drones, I should say, without the stings, that is, money. For example, the rogues invest their money into the paupers in the form of loans and stick it to them with high interest rates, and the little drones without stings lack even the virtue and common sense to rein in their appetites and to resist the sneakiness and the scams of the rogues. They're victims, all right, but they're also virtueless and pretty stupid. Hence arises a division between the oligarchs and democrats within the mercantile class of a society. Now, in The Dark Knight Rises, the imagery of bees and rogues is consistently applied to the former group, the rich drones with the stingers, who are perceived as a threat by a growing number of paupers within the mercantile class. And that sets the stage for Bane's stadium speech. Who are Gotham's rogues? You guys thought that was a reference and a tip of the hat to Batman's impressive rogues gallery.
Admirable, but mistaken.
Not entirely. The Gotham Rogues are the rich upper class of corporate Gotham. That's the name used in Republic Book 8. And why are they wearing yellow and black? Is that because the scene was filmed in Pittsburgh's Steelers Arena? Is that because those are Batman's traditional colors? Is it a subtle reference to the Christian rock band Stryper?
Admirable, but mistaken.
Can't believe I was off point with that Stryper guess. No, it's because those are B colors. And never forget, when you're partying with the oligarchs...
Who's your date?
His wife's in Ibiza. She left her diamonds behind, though. Worried they might get stolen.
It's pronounced Ibiza.
It's pronounced Ibiza. That was a clever one, Jonah Nolan. Now, you're aware of the bees of Gotham, just in case you missed the birds of Gotham, and don't forget there's at least 3 lions of Gotham who aren't as good as the dogs of Gotham, and I still want to talk later about the 2 horses in Gotham. Have I left anyone out? Oh, yeah. There was a bat there somewhere. Okay, at least you spotted the bat in Gotham, who is fighting a pretty nasty snake in Gotham. I still haven't talked about the Catwoman. You know, dang it, this town is a zoo. Let's focus on the bees, okay? The rogues in the seedy underbelly of this state. When class divisions arise between drones with stingers, aka the rogues, and the little drones without the stingers, aka the paupers, according to Republic Book 8, these groups are held together in a fragile union secured by a clumsy group of politicians called magistrates. Now, these politicians are caught in the middle, catering to the paupers because they are more numerous, but also trying to cater to the stinger drones or rogues because they got the cash. And that brings us to the topic of the rapid city monuments in this scene. You see, there's a problem in Gotham. The magistrate who has secured civil peace and rest in Gotham, he's dead. In other words, he's a monument. And that would be this man.
This man.
This great man.
This man, Harvey Dent.
Harvey Dent.
But not so much a monument in the mind of Bane, so much as a...
This fallen idol, the false idol,
Harvey Dent is the monument performing the function of the magistrates in Republic Book 8.
who has been held up to you as the shining example of justice.
So in his stadium speech, what Bane is really promising to do for Gotham is just what he pulled off symbolically by blowing up the football field. He's going to undermine the monuments or magisterium and along with it, the rogues of Gotham on behalf of the paupers. Remember, when Bane uses the term the people, he really means something else.
And we give it back to you. The people. The people.
When a man who is wealthy and is accused of being an enemy of the people, specifically the paupers, sees this, he flees and rests not and is not ashamed to be called a coward, because if he doesn't run like a coward then, he's never going to get a second chance. For as a sickly frame is made ill by a mere touch from without, and sometimes without an external cause, ready to fall to pieces in itself, so with the least cause or with none at all, the city at this stage falls ill and fights a battle for life or death. A single touch, click of a button, brings a fight for life or death. The movie makes clear that Gotham's been limping forward in a state of decay ever since the previous movie, The Dark Knight. The corruption and decline is everywhere throughout. Although you didn't catch it in the movie, Mayor Garcia has been foolishly aligning himself with the rich rogues of Gotham, and the script describes him as being in a corporate box at this football game. That's a euphemism. He's in cahoots with the oligarchs and the rogues. His job, however, was to be a watchman of the state and keep vigilance.
We must remember that vigilance is the price of safety.
Now, people are talking about repealing the Dent Act, and to them, I say, not on my watch.
Destruction sneaks up from behind this watchman of the state, or if you prefer, the ward of the state, just like the rogues of Gotham fell behind the back of this particular ward of Gotham. That's actually Hines Ward, former Steelers receiver and Super Bowl MVP who makes a cameo in this scene, alongside former Pittsburgh Governor Luke Ravenstahl. Hines Ward's folks, I'm not joking. Look, I'm just going to say this twice. If you can work a person's real name into your plot and nobody notices, geez. And let's not forget Luke Ravenstahl in this scene, kicking off for the monuments. He's a former place kicker for Washington and Jefferson College. So why is he kicking off for the monuments? Well, the importance of symbols and monuments to the preservation of society is a huge theme in this film, and it goes all the way back to Batman Begins.
In the Depression, your father nearly bankrupted Wayne Enterprises combating poverty. He believed that his example could inspire the wealthy of Gotham to save their city.
Did it?
In a way, their murder shocked the wealthy and the powerful into action.
People need dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy, and I can't do that as Bruce Wayne. As a man, I'm flesh and blood. I can be ignored, I can be destroyed, but as a symbol, I can be incorruptible.
Monuments are vital to staving off the influences of decay and corruption within society. The raven, of course, is the classic symbol for death. You got that right. Monuments are a stall on the forces of death. They're a raven stall. God, whatever. I'm just going to say this was it 4 times? You know what? Screw it. I'm moving on. When the magisterium or the monuments of society fall, according to Republic Book 8, the numerically superior drones without the stingers are going to swoop in with a vengeance on the oppressive and outnumbered drones of the rogue class, ultimately leading to the rise of a tyrant who will stand aloft in the chariot of state unopposed. This in the Republic Book 8 is the collapse of oligarchy into democracy. When that happens, there's a city full of freedom. Anybody can do what they like. As Socrates puts it, the individual is clearly able to order his life for himself as he pleases.
Gotham is yours. None shall interfere. Do as you please.
And one thing pleases the vicious paupers who had no stingers, and that's revenge. Democracy erupts into being after the poor conquer their opponents, slaughtering some and banishing some, and splitting up the goods to everybody. Slaughtering some and banishing some.
Choice is yours. Exile or death.
As Jowett puts it, the protector slays some and exiles others, and at once he hints at the abolition of debts and the division of property.
Tomorrow you claim what is rightfully yours.
And thus he's going to rise into the tyrant. He slays and exiles.
Death or exile? Death by exile.
Get ready, folks, because the characters and events in this movie all come directly from the Republic, Book 8. It's the righteous man versus the maximally unrighteous man, the tyrant of Republic, Book 8, the unholy trinity, and all the forces of hell and damnation. And Thanos is a pussy cat. And yes, Virginia, there certainly is a Batman code.
But wait! There's more!
Come on, folks. Did you really think that Christopher Nolan was going to cover all 4 cardinal virtues and leave those 3 little angels out of the picture? Got news for you. We have 3 topics left to cover. Remember, there are 7 heavenly virtues in total, just as traditionally there are 7 deadly sins. Take a look at this scene again, which was added to David Goyer's original script by Christopher Nolan.
There were 7.
I counted 6, Mr. Wayne.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's always 7 virtues to oppose 7 enemies of the soul, 7 sins. Hey, wait. Does this mean that Ra's al Ghul missed an enemy of the soul? What was that?
I know the rage that drives you. That impossible anger. Your anger gives you great power.
What stopped it?
Vengeance.
Wrath. That's my guess. You need 7 virtues, because just like there are 7 dwarves, you got to keep an eye out for 7 jokers in total. And if the Batman needs to learn that, then so does his young replacement, Blake, as he squares off with, count them again, folks, 7 enemies.
You missed the spot.
No, he didn't. Can't miss one of the 7, and can't be a righteous man without developing all 7 opposing virtues to these vices. Does that mean? Yep. Faith, hope, and love are consciously worked into the structure of the trilogy as well, just in a different order. In this trilogy, it actually goes love, faith, and hope, and I'm about to prove it. Back to Raphael again. The first film establishes altruism or charity as Batman's first theological virtue, especially with regards to children. So this little boy, whose role in Goyer's script was actually very minimal, is not a useless character like some people have thought. He appears in the final scenes to establish Batman in that movie as altruistic. As Nolan puts it in a commentary on the first movie, it's a question of character, the ability to channel negative impulses into something altruistic, not just personal vengeance. That's what establishes Batman, as opposed to previous incarnations of a more common vigilante like the Punisher or Charles Bronson in Death Wish. Nolan added the word compassion twice, as well as 2 utterances of the word pity in his scripts.
Like you, I was forced to learn there are those without decency who must be fought without hesitation, without pity.
When you lived among the criminals, did you start to pity them?
Compassion is a weakness your enemies will not share. I warned you about compassion, Bruce.
To emphasize the point. So wait, the second movie is going to be about...
Because sometimes truth isn't good enough. Sometimes people deserve more. Sometimes people deserve to have their faith rewarded.
It's significant that Rachel's farewell letter is the only place in the movie script where the words faith, hope, and love all appear together in the same context. Pay attention. Faith in this trilogy is faith in people specifically. It's faith in other people that wins the day against Joker's attempts to turn people against one another. And when Lucius Fox can't tell if Bruce Wayne is resorting to something sneaky or snaky, in the script, Batman simply replies, "Trust me." Mutual faith and trust in people. That's how they overcame. It's precisely what saves the 2 ferry boats from blowing each other to smithereens. Mutual faith and trust in people. So wait, the third movie is going to be about...
hope. Every man who has rotted here over the centuries has looked up to the light and imagined climbing to freedom, and learned here that there can be no true despair without hope. So, as I terrorize Gotham, I will feed its people hope to poison their souls.
Love, faith, and hope, everybody. It's a virtue trilogy fundamentally, and all 7 virtues are covered, and all 7 virtues need to be taught through the example of elders to the youth of society. Raising up the youth by example is a major sub-theme of this trilogy. So pay attention again to Jen and Blake, whose names were changed from Holly Robinson and Dick Grayson, respectively. Jen means white. It's the shortened form of Jennifer, meaning white fairy, and Blake means black. Black and white are there for contrast. One is being raised up under the misguided tutelage of the Catwoman, the other under the example set by his mentor, Bruce Wayne. And so Jen, sometimes singled out as the most pointless of all the characters in the Dark Knight saga, is important when you realize the amount of character development and contrasting that's going on. Still don't believe that the trilogy consciously followed 7 virtues? If the Batman had to learn 7 virtues along the way to righteousness, then how many do you think that Blake has to learn? Does that mean?
Of course. Of course.
Of course. Let's walk Blake, like the Batman, straight through the Republic and the 4 cardinal virtues, precisely in the order Plato treats them. Get ready, folks. Deep breath. Here we go. First up, the bridal of Sophrosyne. In Batman Begins, Gordon is contrasted with Arnold Flass very early in the dialogue taking place in a police car. Flass is depicted as greedy, drunk, overweight, and appetitive, and Gordon is a model of Sophrosyne, or rational restraint. In the third movie, Blake is paralleled to an unbridled Foley, precisely in terms of rational restraint and Sophrosyne, again, the dialogue occurring in a police car. Second, Blake isn't one of those horses of Gotham like the Batman. He's one of the dogs of Gotham.
Hey Blake, you be careful out there. They're hunting down cops like dogs.
Another young lad of spirit and the spirited element, and he's got to rein in the lion that lies in the chest in the spirited element with the virtue of Andrea. This kid's angry and desperately needs a thermos for his thymos. Hope you guys caught that, because he said it 5 times.
Be angry for a while. Then they want the angry little kid to do something he knows he can't do. So after a while, they stop understanding. They send the angry kid to a boys' home. I figured it out too late. You gotta learn to hide the anger. I'd seen that look on your face before. It's the same one I taught myself.
If he can rightly govern the spirited element, then he's ready to move on to the third cardinal virtue, which has already been anticipated by those spears and arrowheads you see behind him in these scenes. He's asked to exhibit the ability to know when to follow rules and what to do in exceptional cases. That's the virtue of prudence or phronesis.
You have all these rules and you think they'll save you.
And that leads us to another allegedly useless character, which we find in the bridge scene. He's there for character development, specifically Blake's character development. Is righteousness all about rules and following orders?
You're such a bigot! You killed her! And follow your orders!
And let's be honest, did he, the guy watching the bridge, really kill those orphans? He didn't set off the nuclear bomb. He just let them die, right?
Killing is making a choice. Choose between one life or the other. And that's the point. You'll have to choose.
Tricky question. And you better deal with that arrowhead before you try to handle the snake. You're going to need more virtues. And also, even though the scene didn't make it into some versions of the movie, in the script, Father Riley attempts to lead the orphans on the bus in a prayer by following a general rule. They need to make their peace. Blake is furious with him, protesting that the rule doesn't apply to children. They don't have any peace to make. And finally, even though the scene is really awkward and forced by my standards, we get to the fourth virtue. Blake, just like the Batman in the first movie, is set parallel to Gordon, and speaking at length on the topic of justice. Structures becoming shackles, he can't handle the injustice of Bruce Wayne not getting the credit he deserves, and according to the script, he even directs his eyes towards a garden in disrepair, disharmony, if you will. That's an obvious Garden of Eden reference. Gardens, like souls and states, need constant tending. So there you have it, folks. All four cardinal virtues, temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice, directly in the order that Plato treats them in the Republic. Of course, we're going to have to cover 3 theological virtues, but directly in the order that the Batman demonstrated or acquired them. Once again, your new hero is characterized in terms of charity and altruism, and again, specifically with regards to the compassion he shows towards the youth and children, orphans of Gotham. Secondly, he's established as a man of faith, because remember, specifically, he keeps his faith in other people.
But I'm still a believer in the Batman, even if you're not.
Still a believer, we're on to virtue of hope.
Protection from the blast. We're gonna be all right. Double time, go!
It's an atom bomb.
You think they need to hear that right now? Why don't you let them die without hope? Come on!
And there you have it, 7 virtues once more. I'd like to conclude with a special thank you to all the people who made this 3-part video introduction possible, including David Goyer, the Nolan brothers, me, myself, and I, and of course, Lawrence the Boombox Goon. Love you, man. The Batman Code is a literary unity in the trilogy of Christopher Nolan, and it is formed by, specifically, the cardinal virtues of Plato's Republic fleshed out in the themes of John Milton's Paradise Lost. This trilogy deserves a better class of critic.
I'm gonna give it to him.
And I'm going to give it to him. Stick with me for 3 more lectures as we explore these literary diamonds further, because I'm going to burn this forest down.
I'm a man of my word.
That means I got my work cut out for me.
I like this job. I like it.
I'm kind of starting to like my job. And rest assured, there is, was, and always will be a Batman Code. The 4 cardinal virtues of Plato's Republic, essential to any righteous man and righteous society, with of course a little help from faith, hope, and love to take on the forces of sin, death, and the devil. And up next, we're going to continue to examine The Dark Knight Rises. We still haven't answered all our questions. What went right? What went wrong? What the heck even went on in this movie? Get ready, a full-blown exposition of The Republic, Book 8. We'll see you then.